Time to re-up YouTube. Your boy Mustard is back with another episode of the season preview, and here we are in the upper half. To start things off at 14, we got the New Orleans Pelicans. Now I know there's a lot of people that are super high on the Pelicans and may think I'm disrespecting them having them at this position. This is a team that last year was able to take the first seeded Phoenix Suns in the first round to 6 games and did it without their star Zion Williamson. So of course it leaves a lot of people wondering if you just add Zion to the mix, not only were they probably going to beat the Phoenix Suns, but they could be contenders in the Western Conference. And when it comes to that sentiment, I definitely think there is truth to that. This is a roster that from top to bottom is not perfect, but their strengths and strong points are definitely something that no team in the league should want to deal with. And considering that their core is relatively young, the expectation for them is simply to make the playoffs and be respectable. Some people may predict that they're going to be an elite team, but they don't really have the pressure of being one of the top 4 to 5 teams in the Western Conference. They just got some young guys on that roster that have the potential to lead them towards that kind of success. And if players like Zion, Brandon Ingram, and Herb Jones have the potential that we believe they have, then there's a good chance they could exceed expectations. But before I get deep into my bag with my thoughts on the New Orleans Pelicans as a whole, make sure you go and check out the latest episode of the Off the Grid podcast. We talked about Tua's injury with the Miami Dolphins, the hurricane going on in Florida, and plenty of other topics around the world. The link is down below in the description box as well as the pinned comment. But let's get back to the New Orleans Pelicans and let's look at their roster and see what they're having to work with this upcoming year. When you look at their depth, I actually think it's a lot better than some people believe. For starters, let's look at their young guys in Dyson Daniels and Trey Murphy. Daniels may not be the best offensive player, he definitely has some holes on that side of the ball, but defensively he has a lot of promise on that end. And on a team that's built around 2 wings in Zion and Ingram that are not the best defenders in the world, you cannot have enough wings like Dyson Daniels that can switch on multiple positions or at least have the potential to. Then you throw into the mix Trey Murphy, who they drafted last season, and I think that Trey Murphy showed some promise in the regular season, but in the playoffs he had some big moments for them against the Suns. He may not be the defender that guys like Daniels or Herb Jones are, but offensively he can space the floor and he's a knockdown shooter in catch and shoot situations. Similar to Daniels with his defense, you can't have enough shooters around Zion. Another young guy that they have on their bench that I love, he may even be a starter at times, and that's Jackson Hayes. Hayes may not be living up to that number 9 overall pick that he was in his draft class, but I think overall he's improved in a major way, and you saw that last season. From around like March till the end of the season, he showed some promise with his 3-point shooting. Even though I'm not expecting him to come out guns a-blazing from behind the arc next season, there's something there as a jump shooter for him. But we all know when it comes to his real strengths, it really isn't his shot creation or his 3-point shooting, it's his defense and effectiveness in the pick and roll. On the defensive side of the ball, he can move his feet on the perimeter and he's a good shot blocker, so he can recover very well if they beat him off the dribble because of his length and size. He can become a very good help defender, which he's already shown the potential to do. And on the offensive end, he is so explosive in the pick and roll due to his athleticism. He's a great lob threat, and I think he's going to work very well on this roster. Next season, I'm expecting some real big things from Jackson Hayes. I'm not saying he's going to be an all-star or anything, but this is a big year for his career, his bread, and considering he was a high pick in the draft, I mean, we've already lowered our expectations. You got to at least live up to some of them, bruh. Another big that I like on this roster is Larry Nance. I know he's a little bit undersized, but he gives you a lot of effort on the boards, and defensively he's gotten so much better from his earlier days with the Lakers. Nance was dominating the Suns on the offensive glass. I believe he averaged around 3 to 4 offensive boards a game. That was insane for real. And we already know he's a good lob threat. He's got those hops, even though it's not like it was in LA, but he can still rise up and boom it on a lot of people in the league if he wants to. Devontae Graham was a pickup that they had for them last season, and he didn't really pan out if we're being honest. That's the whole reason why they went after CJ McCollum in the first place. But despite Devontae not being a great starting point guard, which I kind of knew, he's not a great playmaker or defender, he's still a decent spot up shooter, and sure, he's not Lonzo Ball, which they let just essentially leave for nothing, which still to this day baffles me beyond comprehension. You still can't have enough shooters alongside Zion and Ingram, so he can be useful in some spots. I love Jose Alvarado. He's a nice floor spacer and shows a lot of effort and hustle on the defensive side of the ball. That man was truly giving CP3 some nightmares in the playoffs last year, I ain't gonna lie. He has a truly infectious spirit about him, the fans connect to him, and it bleeds into the teammates. You can see it last year. And for a young team that's trying to establish a culture around Zion Williamson, I definitely think those little things do add up to mattering a lot more than you think. But now that we've talked about the bench and the supporting cast, let's talk about some of the more important guys on this team, and that brings me to Herb Jones. Herb Jones is going to be probably their most important defensive player, and actually that's not even a debate. He is their most important defensive player, as a lot of their better players on this team are obviously not defensive minded, and that's not to say that they're all liabilities, but Herb Jones is going to have to cover for a lot of those defensive weaknesses, and if last year is any indication, I'd say he's going to do a pretty good job at it. He may not make this defense a top 5 or top 10 defense in the league, but the man is true clamps that was on the verge of making an all-defensive team as a rookie last season for good reason. He can stay in front of perimeter players and on the wing due to his length and size. He can defend some of those guys as well. He can be a decent weak side shot blocker and help defender, and he's so good at getting in passing lanes or just straight up ripping you. He truly can lock up some of the best players in one-on-one situations, and it blows my mind sometimes. The fact that he fell all the way to the second round, you could argue he's the biggest steal of the draft last year. Shout out to the Pelicans front office, for real. Their starting center, Valanciunas, even though he's kind of flawed defensively, I don't think he's a liability. I truly do believe if Zion can step up at that power forward position and be at least average, he can make up for some of that. But Valanciunas' true value comes as an offensive player. He's grown as a shooter over the years, and as a rebounder, he's one of the most underrated rebounders in the league. You could argue he's the best in the league at that, and nobody talks about it, for real. In 30 minutes a game last year, he averaged 11 rebounds and also averaged 3 offensive boards a game as well. And in the playoffs, his domination of Ayton on the boards was a huge reason why they were able to push the Suns to 6 games. Nobody averaged more rebounds per game throughout the entire playoffs than he did, with 14 a night and nearly 6 offensive rebounds a game as well. And don't just think this guy's some rebound machine, he's actually a very skilled post scorer as well. He's also a nice high IQ player that can pass out of the post, and I would definitely like to see what he can do with players like CJ McCollum and Zion Ingram, all those guys next season. But now that finally brings us to the big 3 of the New Orleans Pelicans: CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, and Zion Williamson. Let's start off with their latest addition and pick up CJ McCollum. CJ McCollum has been one of the better guards in the NBA over the last 4 to 5 seasons. He's one of the most effective mid-range shooters in the league, can get to his spots and it's automatic from there. His offensive bag, quote unquote, is just as deep as anybody's in the league. He's a good free throw shooter, and he's a great shooter from behind the arc as well. He can create for himself on the ball, and he can score off the ball. As a playmaker, I think he was somewhat held back with the Portland Trailblazers from showing what he could do, sharing the backcourt with Damian Lillard, because in all reality, CJ has a point guard's height. He probably should be playing the point guard anyways, and that's what he's gonna do in New Orleans. I think he's gonna rise to the occasion offensively and be the spark plug they need as the third option and the #1 playmaker on this roster. Though I do get on this organization for giving us Lonzo essentially for free, I do love the fact that they were able to pick up CJ McCollum in the trade market last year. Even though defensively he's very suspect and has always been for a majority of his career, he doesn't have to defend 2 guards. He was kind of undersized at that position, if we're being honest. And offensively, Zion has never had a point guard that has true gravity to his game. Teams aren't gonna go under CJ McCollum's screens, and if they do, he's gonna make them pay for it. And unlike many other point guards, he doesn't need the ball in his hands to be effective. He can play a whole game off ball and still give you around 20+ points per game. Those same qualities apply to Brandon Ingram, who's also one of the better players in the league. You could argue a top 25 player in the NBA when fully healthy. Don't let the Pelicans record last year fool you from how impactful Brandon Ingram was to this roster. Ingram missed a couple of games last season, but when he played, he actually led the Pelicans to an above 500 record. His 3-point shooting went down last year, but with less spacing, I expect that to happen. Nonetheless though, his playmaking, I believe, actually got better. He's making better reads in the half-court situations, whether it's finding guys out of double team situations or in the dunker, off the lob, in the pick and roll. He can do all of those things. He can get to the rim, he's a good free throw shooter, and he's still one of the best mid-range shooters in the league. And though he has regressed a bit defensively from his time in LA, probably due to the offensive load he has now versus then, I still don't think he's some liability. I just think he's somewhat of a neutral defender. If not, he can be that at for this team going forward. Ingram was one of the standouts of the playoffs last season and had a breakout party, averaging 27 points a game, 6 assists and 6 rebounds on 47% from the field, 41% from 3, 83% at the free throw line, which accumulates to a true shooting percentage of 58%. Mind you, this is up against a Phoenix Suns team that was 3rd in defensive rating and 8th in opponents' points per game, while being primarily guarded by a defensive player of the year candidate in Mikal Bridges. Ingram has all of the offensive tools to be a legitimate number 2 option on a championship team one day, and thankfully this organization has a promising number 1 option, and that's Zion Williamson. Zion has been the talk of the league ever since he's come into the NBA, and I definitely think that's faded off in certain moments of his career, and for good reason due to him being out of shape. But if there were any questions about his shape, I ain't gonna lie, all that shit is shut down right now going forward. We all seen the pictures and videos, the comparisons, the side-by-sides of him at Media Day this year versus last year, and oh my goodness, what a difference a year makes. I think seeing his team last year in the playoffs, especially not being able to play and help them out, if anything, that did more positive than good for Zion. Sure, he wanted to play and he probably could have played, but it definitely should have been a sign to him that his team is not filled with a bunch of scrubs. They can compete with some of the best teams in the NBA in the playoffs even when he's not there. And they did it last year, taking the Suns to 6 games, the first seeded Phoenix Suns I should add. The Pelicans went through so much adversity just to get in the playoffs, and them showing the resilience that they did once they got there should have been a sign to Zion that this is the place that he needs to be, and he's talked about it in interviews, so I know that's what he's thinking. And with him in very good shape, it seems like, I definitely think he's gonna have the best year of his career, which isn't saying too much considering that he's only played 2 seasons. But I think next year there's a good chance Zion could average 30 points per game, and I'm so serious about that. He has shooters on this team around him like Brandon Ingram, Trey Murphy, CJ McCollum. He has a big on the interior that may not be the best defender in the world, but he's a good rebounder, especially on the offensive glass. And Zion doesn't need the ball in his hands to be extremely effective. He can play off the ball. He's a good roller. He's explosive in the pick and roll, one of the best lob threats in the league even at 6'6". He hustles on the offensive glass better than a lot of players in the NBA, and because of how relentless he is with his athleticism, he's one of the best in the league at applying rim pressure. I mean, you could find numerous situations of a lot of players helping off of shooters on the perimeter just so they could stop Zion. It truly reminds me of Giannis in a way. And Zion's also a good passer. I don't think he's great at reading defenses to the level of guys like a Giannis or a Jokic, but he's already shown the potential as a playmaker. He's a very good passer in these short roll situations. I don't really believe in the whole point Zion thing as a full-time situation, but I definitely think we could see those flashes on the team next season. The only true concerns I have for this roster is health and defense. When it comes to health, I'm just really concerned with Zion, Ingram, and CJ if I'm being quite honest with you. All 3 of these players are coming off of injury-riddled seasons, and in an ever-growing Western Conference, just missing 5 games is a big deal. So you could imagine a scenario where each of them misses about 10 to 15 games. The other issue I have is defense. Zion is not a good defender. Hell, you could even go as far as to say when he last played, he was a liability defensively. Then you throw in CJ McCollum, who's never going to be that good of a defender and never has been. And Ingram, I like him, but he's pretty neutral on that end these days. And Valanciunas is also not a great rim protector. I don't think anybody on this team is going to be a liability next season outside of CJ, I ain't gonna lie. But I'm really taking a leap of faith to say that about Zion because he hasn't shown me anything on that side of the ball. He has the athleticism and just the raw ability to be a plus on that end, especially as a help defender, but I gotta see more consistency on that side of the ball before I can truly trust him and have them higher on this list, because he's gonna be sharing minutes with 2 other non-defenders in CJ and Valanciunas, so he has to be at least average. But even despite that, I really like this Pelicans squad. They have youth, they have vibrance, they have energy, and the Pelicans front office has done a great job. They haven't done a perfect job, but I definitely love what they've done around Zion and Ingram to build a culture for those 2. And if you just go back 1 year ago, it looked like Zion was eventually going to be on his way out. But as I said earlier, what a difference 1 year could make. They went from being a team that might lose their potential superstar one day in Zion Williamson to a team that nobody in the Western Conference wants to see in the first round, because I believe they are the most dangerous team in the NBA. They proved it last year, and with Zion coming back, it's only going to amplify it to a higher degree. But that wraps up this video. Those are my thoughts on the Pelicans. If you agree or disagree, let me know down below in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on all of my social media, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch. All those links are down below in the description box. This is your boy Young Mustard signing out. You guys stay safe and have a blessed day. Peace.